to show support. They come through this agency every day, and he's very supportive, which is exactly what FEMA needs. There's just too much blame going around, and we need to be focused, Chuck, on what is Puerto Rico going to look like tomorrow.
Final question, Wall Street Journal headline, a bit disconcerting, I'm sure, for you, as you're preparing, saying your job, that the White House considered replacing you before Hurricane Florence hit, having to do with your use of travel back home to North Carolina. Were you aware of this investigation? Are you cooperating?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And look, let me go ahead and clear up all the news. Secretary Nielsen has never asked me to resign. We have a very functional and professional relationship. We talk every day. We are both solely focused on Florence. And let's put some context around this. So these vehicles, the FEMA administration position, the position that I hold, is incredibly complex, Chuck. You do not want to trade jobs with me. The bottom line is that these vehicles were designed to support Presidential Preparedness Directive 40. I have a very critical and important role to make sure that this government works on the nation's worst day through continuity of government. These vehicles are designed to provide secure communications, and the program was actually developed back in 2008. It ran for me the same way it's run for anybody else. And, it's my understanding that maybe some policies were not developed on these vehicles that we will get cleared up and push forward. So, yeah.
You have no plans to resign?
No. No. I'm here to serve my country every day. That's all I do.
All right.
And when it's over, whenever it ends, I'm ready to go back home, love my family.
All right, Brock Long, I know you've got to get back to work. Director of FEMA, thanks for coming on and answering our questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
By the way, if you want to help the folks who've been hit by Hurricane Florence, you can. Here are 4 organizations that we are recommending: the Red Cross, Direct Relief, Second Harvest Food Bank, and the North Carolina Disaster Fund. All of them are aiding people in the path of Florence. Coming up, the big political story of the week: Paul Manafort agreeing to cooperate with Special Counsel Robert Mueller. I'll talk to Democrat Adam Schiff and Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz when we come back.
I was able to turn the aircraft around and the mission around, and was able to save 2 men's lives that night.
My first job helped me to grow up pretty quickly. That'll happen when you're asked to respond to a coup.
In 2001, I signed up for the Air Force. 2 days later, 9/11 happened.
Welcome back. Paul Manafort's guilty plea and agreement to cooperate with Robert Mueller gives the special counsel a witness of potentially enormous value. Manafort has countless connections that Mueller can probe. For instance, he can ask about the infamous Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer who said she had dirt on Hillary Clinton. Why? Manafort was in the room where it happened. Then there's Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska, who's very close to Vladimir Putin, and to whom Manafort apparently offered private briefings once he joined the Trump campaign. There's Manafort's longtime Russian business partner, Konstantin Kilimnik, who's an alleged longtime Russian intelligence agent. And under Manafort's leadership, there's the Trump campaign's mysterious gutting of a Republican platform amendment to send lethal weapons to Ukrainians fighting Russian forces. And of course, there's Manafort's first business partner in politics, Roger Stone, who appears to have talked to WikiLeaks about hacked emails. So a lot of dots, and maybe Manafort connects a bunch of them. Joining me now is the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff of California. Congressman Schiff, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you.
So let's start with Manafort's cooperating. If you have a chance to ask him questions, what are the first series of questions you want to know and you assume Mr. Mueller wants to know?
Well, Manafort is at the confluence of a number of pernicious interests. You've got the president's son trying to get dirt from the Russians at Trump Tower. You've got the president himself asking the Russians for dirt on Hillary Clinton in a public statement. You've got Manafort trying to get money from this Russian oligarch, trying to get made whole. You have the Russians who want to have a relationship with the Trump campaign. They want to help Trump get elected. All those interests converge with Paul Manafort. So basically, we want to know what can Manafort tell us about whether any of that was consummated. He's trying to get money. They're trying to get dirt. The Russians are trying to help Trump. Was there a meeting of the minds? So that goes to the heart of the collusion or conspiracy issue.
Is it possible that with all this circumstantial evidence, it really is just a bunch of coincidences that Paul Manafort, in a desperate move, Donald Trump was afraid of Ted Cruz at the convention, stealing the nomination. He's told to hire this Manafort guy, doesn't do the background check, and those Russian connections just happen to be coincidence. What's the likelihood of that based on your investigation?
Well, Manafort is a key person to help us unwind whether this is the most improbable string of unlikely coincidences or whether this was an active conspiracy. And, the bottom line is Manafort knows. Will Manafort cooperate? Will he tell Mueller all he knows, or will he tell Mueller only what he thinks Mueller already knows? And the reality is, I think only he can tell us.
You're a former prosecutor. Would you have cut this deal that Mueller cut?
Well, I wasn't in the room for the proffer, so I don't know what Manafort has to say. But I do know this, and this is, I think, a couple of the profound implications of this. This sends a message to anyone who is in Bob Mueller's crosshairs right now. You better get to the special counsel and make your deal now, because anyone who gets indicted by Bob Mueller goes down. And the longer you wait to come clean, the worse deal you're going to get, the more time you're going to face. So I think that it obviated the need for these trials, which gives Mueller time to focus on other things. It gives him a key cooperating witness who has already seen what happens when you mess with Bob Mueller. I mean, he tried to essentially tamper with witnesses. He got caught. He went to jail. He better come clean.
He's been convicted already in one court of law. He has witness tampered, as you just brought up. Why should Mueller believe anything that Paul Manafort seems to be a guy that will say whatever it takes to get out of a jam. That's including one of the allegations with Oleg Derpach. Oh, geez, I'm on a jam with him. Maybe I can. How do we not know that Manafort is just somebody that will tell whatever anybody is listening in that moment to get him out of a jam?
All of these cooperating witnesses are corrupt. Manafort certainly is. Manafort basically is the swamp. But also Flynn and also Gates. I mean, all of these people, and Cohen, if Cohen cooperates, all of these folks have pled guilty to lying and fraud. They're all tainted witnesses, and so as a prosecutor, you only rely on them to the extent you can corroborate them. But often you can. If Paul Manafort says, I spoke to Donald Trump about the Trump Tower meeting, I did it at this particular time and this particular phone call, and you go to the phone records and you find those phone records, that corroborates the statement. So you're not going to rely on the word alone, but you're going to rely on it when you can corroborate it.
Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, has said that Manafort is not disqualified. That's the word he used, from a pardon. Rudy Giuliani also confirmed that Manafort's legal team and the president's legal team had a sharing agreement of sorts. What do you make of the pardon, of Rudy Giuliani still dangling the idea of a pardon out there?
Well, clearly the Trump team is terrified about what Manafort may have to say.
That's how you view it, that this is about fear of Manafort.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, they may think they know what Manafort has to say because he was part of that joint defense agreement, but they have to know that he may not have told them the full truth. And so they're terrified of what he has to say. Now, I'm surprised, I think, like you are, that we are where we are, that Manafort is cooperating.
You didn't expect him to play?
I thought he would hold out for pardon, but two things I think changed his mind. The first is you've got the state prosecutions hanging out there, and one of the brilliant things of the Mueller team is getting Manafort to admit to all of these crimes, both state and federal crimes. So even if he got pardoned by the federal government, by Donald Trump, he gets prosecuted by numerous states potentially. He goes away for a long time anyway. But also Paul Manafort had to conclude, watching the whole Michael Cohen saga, that trust and loyalty with Trump run in one direction only. You're loyal to him. He's not loyal to you. And so I think that
final question
sealed
for
the
you.
deal.
As a member of Congress, one thing Mueller has done is surfaced a lot of, I think, dirty and weird stuff that happens on K Street with the lobbying community. What is Congress actually going to do to try to actually clean up the swamp? Because they haven't done anything. You guys have threatened this for decades, to be honest.
Well, this, I think, is going to be a core part of the Democratic agenda if we're able to take over the House, as looks increasingly likely.
You didn't do it the last time, though. In
Well,
06, you didn't clean up anything, and that was culture corruption. And what did we get? I mean, it didn't do anything.
Chuck, if we don't, we won't stay in the majority. And I want us to stay in the majority. And so we need to go after this.
You failed the last time.
We need to do the oversight. We need to do the oversight that this Congress has completely abdicated responsibility. We took steps when we were in the majority before to clean up, to crack down. It's not like you can say it's job accomplished,
right,
because people find new and inventive ways to skirt the rules, to refill the swamp. But the concern I have right now is Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. The only one draining the swamp right now is Bob Mueller. And the president is talking about pardoning the swamp. And we got to make sure there's no further active obstruction of justice.
All right, Adam Schiff, I'm going to leave it there. I think money and alligators always find a way in a swamp.
Yes, they do.
Anyway, Democrat from California, thanks for coming out and sharing your views, sir. Much appreciated. Joining me now for another perspective is Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law School professor emeritus. He's author of a new book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Professor Dershowitz, always good to have you on. Thanks for being here. Let me start with, you had said that the deal that Mueller got from Manafort was a pretty good one as far as Mueller is concerned. Explain.
Well, I think both Manafort and President Trump acted too late. Manafort, if he was going to make a deal, should have made it before he was convicted. He would have gotten a better deal. And President Trump, if he was going to pardon, he should have pardoned before Manafort agreed to cooperate. So there's not going to be any pardon now. And Manafort has a deal. His sentence will reflect how much cooperation he gives. There is always the risk. A man like Manafort has to walk a tightrope. If he's caught lying, the deal is off. On the other hand, he knows he gets a better deal if he can help support the narrative of the prosecutor. So we may see, and there's always the risk of that, and Judge Ellis said that in the first Manafort case, that some people like this not only sing, but they compose. That is, they elaborate a little bit, they remember things a little better than they occurred, and that's the risk to justice that could occur here.
Rudy Giuliani seems to think a couple things. Number one, he says, let me play a bite for you from him on Friday night, because he seems to think that this deal isn't as bad for them as others believe. Here it is.
I mean, the reality is there was a quote put out by a source close to Manafort that the plea agreement and the cooperation agreement has nothing to do with the Trump campaign. Quote, there is no evidence of collusion. Now, I know that because I've been privy to a lot of facts I can't repeat, but the reality is no evidence of collusion.
Now, Professor Dershowitz, even yesterday, Rudy Giuliani continued to say, according to sources close to Manafort's defense, that this cooperation agreement does not involve the Trump campaign. First of all, what is Rudy Giuliani referring to? Is this something he may have learned during the fact because they have a joint defense agreement of some sort?
No, the joint defense agreement, by the way, has to be over at this point if he's cooperating. Second of all, as Congressman Schiff correctly pointed out, you can't count on what was told to you while you had a joint defense agreement. Manafort is on your side, he says one thing, he's on the other side, he says something else. What I don't understand is how you can say that the deal is limited. The deal, as I understand it, says that Manafort will cooperate about anything that the special counsel asks him about. There are no limits. This wasn't a deal that says we're going to talk only about so-and-so, but we're not going to.
They might have felt from the Manafort team before they cut this deal?
Well, I would use that information if he ever testified to cross-examine, because he would have waived the privilege at that point, the joint privilege. But no, I wouldn't believe anything he said. I would use the material that he told the Trump team while he was in a joint defense agreement to undercut his credibility if he then says something different. Is he lying now? Was he lying then? You can't believe him, that kind of argument.
Should the president be concerned that Paul Manafort may be able to say that a pardon was promised or a pardon was hinted at or the pardon was dangled during the joint defense agreement?
I doubt that. I think the president was pretty careful in what he said and how he said it, and what he said was said in public. So I don't think that's a real concern. I think the concern is putting together information that the prosecutor knows about but can't connect. We have to remember again that collusion is not a crime. Conspiracy is a crime, but conspiracy requires knowledge, and it's